at at a good rate. And obviously when people join, that's fine too. Everyone, welcome to our Digital Creativity Lab speaker series. Today we're very excited to have Sol Rogers on. Sol and Digital Creativity Labs have quite a long history. We've worked very closely together through the Weaver project, where Rewind and his team have worked with our researchers and developers very closely to create some really cool live mobile apps and VR experiences that allow sort of sports fans to immerse themselves in a virtual version of the game. And since then, obviously, so Sol is the founder and or has been the founder and managing director of Rewind Limited down in St. Albans, which now has been acquired by Magnopus, which is a US-based company, a very exciting company. And so I'll obviously you'll give a due introduction, but Sol is now their head of global innovation, and really bang on in the sort of super relevant areas that are pertinent to much of our research, most notably the metaverse, but he's also really active across government and different bodies such as Immerse UK, to really shape the future of innovation in that space on the UK and now global level. So we are extremely excited to have him here. The format of the chat will be that he's going to give a bit of an introduction and presentation about himself and Magnopus, and then we want to play it as interactively. I've got a few prepared questions, but I'll monitor the chat and we will then have a dynamic back and forth with everyone. How does that sound? Sol, thanks again for being with us today. Over to you.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for the invite. As I said earlier, anything that you ask Florian happens. It's quite easy that way. And it's nice to be talking to a group of academics and students and undergraduates who are kind of right at the forefront of this technology. I think many of us now in industry are very close to our areas of interest, and I think universities give the opportunity to really think broader than individual silos to do some really exciting work. So yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about Magnopus now as the brand, as the company that I work for and work with. I'll happily talk about my journey from starting a business through early days of virtual reality, from DK1s to DK2s to Red Bull to Jaguar, and to where we ended up now, which still feels like the very beginning of the immersive industry. And I'll talk a lot about where I think that the technologies are kind of heading and where I think we're going to go next. And I'll stop on probably one case study specifically. We did a huge project for the Dubai Expo, which is a four square kilometer site in Dubai, which is a new city to represent all of the countries of the world's future innovation ideas. And so we worked with 200 countries, 200 architects to generate a digital twin of it that anyone else in the world can visit. So yeah, Magnopus. So we unite the physical and digital worlds with extraordinary experiences. What that really means is that we know that the intersection between ourselves as a digital self and what we are in the physical self is there are no bounds between it. We have a blended approach to everything. And we create that sort of experience for people around the world, from big brands to individuals to innovate grant-funded projects. We've got an office in Los Angeles and an office in London. Not really London, it's actually St. Albans in Hertfordshire, but anyone from the US doesn't understand that there's anywhere else in the UK other than London. So we always say London, and we're only a mile out. And really we're built on...
Hey, so quickly to interrupt you, are you meaning to share your slides already?
Oh, totally, was supposed to be. Yeah, I was showing my slides a minute ago, wasn't I? And then I stopped showing.
Yes.
That would be nice. How about that?
That looks brilliant. Thank you.
Let's just boot around one more time to make sure I did audio. Yeah, that's fine. Play. One more time. See, if you're in a classroom or a lecture theatre, you could see everyone and everyone would tell you
I
this.
presume this will get easier in the metaverse. I really, really hope so.
It'll be different.
Please tell me.
It'll definitely be sure. So yeah, so like I was saying, bring the worlds together. I've got offices in London and Los Angeles. And the real foundations of it is, in truth, when we were kids, the world was experience rich, but information poor. But today, the world has become experience poor, but information rich. And we're bombarded by every device we own to become an attention economy. So everybody wants our attention and wants to spend it in different ways. But the truth of it through the pandemic is that audiences, users, have all changed. We've changed how we want to engage with content, when we want to engage with it, and why is it important to us. And more and more and more, it means that it needs to be meaningful. It needs to engage with us in a way that ignites our passions, excites us, feels like we're actually changing the world to be a better place in some way. And so it can't just be disposable. There are obviously times when light entertainment is almost like a form of meditation, but in all cases, it's changed from just wanting to be told a story, wanting to be able to live a story and be a participant. The sort of things we have done and are doing, we worked with Pixar to take their movie Coco and redevelop it into a VR experience, a social VR experience that brings people together in their world to experience a version of the story. And it really laid the foundations for the idea that you can create these story worlds, but it's the people within it that really change how you experience it. We worked with Disney, and specifically in this case, The Lion King, to reinvent the idea of filmmaking. And so we really ignited the recent passions around virtual production. In this case, we created a digital twin or a digital version of Pride Rock and every set and environment that the movie was going to be shot in, and then allowed the directors, the DOP, John Farver, and everybody else to put VR headsets on and step onto a digital Pride Rock to shoot the movie inside virtual reality. Once it was shot, we then distributed it to other VFX vendors that rendered it out. But really, it was a milestone moment of being able to enable filmmakers to create content using digital tools. And then over the back end of last year, we worked with an American pop star called Madison Beer and Sony Music to create a concert, an immersive concert that allowed anyone in the world to come together in Sony Music Hall, a digital twin of Sony Music Hall, to come to one of her gigs. So it's about 15, 20 minutes to prove it out, but it's the highest quality digital avatar that I've ever seen created. And the fidelity was so good that some of the execs asked us why we'd actually just gone and shot the promotional film and not done it in CGI, which is a good thing because it was so good, it looked so real. But the main thing we're most proud about is that when you're in the crowd, you feel the energy of being in a room and the energy of being at a music concert along with those people. So we touch different areas of it, and you can see it's quite broad, the type of work we do. So I'm going to show you just 60 seconds, a little show reel of bits of work that we've done over the last couple of years, and then I'll talk a bit more about some of the specifics. Quite a varied type of work there, and we're pretty proud of that, and we like to keep moving. The core of it is kind of thinking around the idea that experiences are going to become spatial experiences. They need to be context and content aware from the worlds we live in. Maybe they're fully digital, or maybe they're an AR layer over what we are. But really got to go back to the very beginning and go to audience first. It's the same as any user experience. Who's going to use this, or who's going to see this, and why? And then build back from that. It's very different from the other days where you just build something and hope that other people would care. And really the core pillars of that for us are real-time engines, so 3D engines, social and multiplayer technologies, being data enabled, meaning it can interconnect with anything else, IoT, on device, weather, whatever it may be, making it accessible across as many platforms, if not all platforms as possible. So audiences can engage with it no matter what technology they have or where they are. And we end up with kind of content pillars, connected characters, digital performers, avatars, assistants, guests, ourselves, how are we represented, connected spaces. So what is the venue, the location, the building, the place, the football stadium that we want to be hosted in? And then what is the content? What's the story? It can be simple or it can be complex. It can be entertainment or it could be education, and anywhere in between, or it could be enterprise. And so you wrap all those things together, and really, we've only had it in the last couple of years, really, where the technologies have come together to do this at a quality which we think is meaningful. And you start adding in every kind of buzzword, 5G, pixel streaming, cloud, edge compute, throw whatever new technology you want over the top of it, dare I say NFTs and blockchain and cryptocurrencies. But the truth of it, all of those technologies are empowering us to create this new format and this new type of content. Really, it's about content and technology hand in hand, experience and information hand in hand, as I said before. And so the ability to now use those tools and create content which is hybrid across different formats or engaged in different ways from different audiences, depending on when and where they are, needs to be unified in our eyes. So we're talking a lot about cross-reality spaces, connected spaces. You could call this the metaverse, you could call it layers within the metaverse, and Magic Leap have often talked about it. But really, we have the ability now to enable enhancements to our reality through the devices, which could just be knowing where they are. It could be that they are showing an AR layer as well, if you wanted it to be a bit more overlaid, and they could be the glasses we wear, or they could be completely digital and digital fabric constructs. And they could be all matched together, or they could be completely separate. It really depends on what and where and how you want to bring all those things together. And so we think that only now have we got all the technologies to do that, and do that at scale, and do that well. So the big digital twin, the project I'll talk about just a bit more detail, was the Expo. So it's been a 3-year project. It was supposed to be 2, but the pandemic kicked the whole launch out here. So we started it in October. We launched it in October 2021, and it runs till March 2022. So it's running live. And it's, like I said, it's the biggest World's Fair there has ever been. And it will have the legacy of a World's Fair. Every country is represented to represent their technologies, their futures, how they're going to work their societies. And it was a huge undertaking by a couple of hundred artists in the UK alone to bring this to bear. And we finished this digital twin in the end as a mobile first application. It's available on iOS and Android, and I'll leave a link at the end that I'd hope you'd all go and download and have a look at it, where it lets you walk around the entire space as a digital avatar and go and experience every piece of architecture there, every major piece of interactivity, every enhancement that we've created, from digital dragons to flocks of eagles to horses they're racing around, and also meet a bunch of quest characters that will show you around the space and send you on missions, but also see other visitors. So I will see myself in St. Albans, and Florian will see his self, and we'll see someone from Los Angeles walking around the space in real time. And it's really exciting. And then all of those enhancements and all of those avatars are the same, because it's a digital twin, to anyone on site. So if I held up my device whilst outside the plaza and looked down the main street, I would see all of the avatars walking up it. I would see the eagle landing on the roof in AR. So that unification of all of the world together is really, really exciting. So project-wise, just a bit of detail. We started with, master planning and architects. We worked with a lot of different architects to bring all of their ideas and their visions together into one 3D space. We crunch them and optimize them to get them run in a mobile engine. In this case, we use Unity as the back end. And then we had to get that to run optimized. So we had to go through, in this case, quite a stylized look to allow this size of space to run on device. And that will just get higher and higher fidelity. We then started to think of all of the experiences. What is it? Why have we created? Why would I want to experience this from afar? And then what can we do beyond just recreating exactly what's there? And we laid out this quite nice idea about quests. So there's characters and quests around the space. There are these people that invite you to join into these stories that are going to be told to you. If you don't want to, you can just walk them past, but someone will tap you on the shoulder and ask you if you want to go and see something magical. It started with a lot of meetings in a very empty part of a desert and a lot of big thoughts about this vision of the future, which then began to crystallize over the years. And it came from the master plan to individual pavilions to this site-wide access and then the districts themselves. And it was really exciting to see not only what could be done in a digital space, because we'd created this environment so that architects could actually see their plans and see them in context, not just only with their own spaces, but also allow them to make big decisions. Once you stand on a location in VR, you understand size and space and scale in a way that you just can't do when you're seeing it on a computer screen. So we're actually part of the architectural planning of the entire thing. And the mobility pavilion is one of the signature 3 buildings. We ended up designing that one first, kind of in collaboration to prove out the tech stack. And it was, it worked so well that they asked us to continue on that partnership and design and work with their fabrication companies to build it. So all of the design and experience, all the crazy giants, all the projection mapping, all came from our initial ideas that we put together. And through the whole process, we actually used VR and VR tools to design and sculpt and iterate on our content that we're creating. And I put together like a little 60-second showreel to show you how our concept art development moved all the way through into 3D art assets. If you've created any sort of game before or understand the game design process, none of these processes will feel different. Early days, sculpting in tilt brush allowed us to sculpt out form very quickly and think about keyframing. In this case, we're talking about a 100-foot water dragon that comes out of the main fountain in AR every few minutes. You hold your phone up and it will come to life and comes and basically gives you a good sniff and a look around and gives you a little moment and then flies off. So designing and sculpting the dragons, thinking about how the animation works, rigging and developing it. Thinking about how all of the particle effects would come to life, and then understanding of how we optimize them to run on a mobile device on an engine. And the lovely thing is about the augmented reality part of this, we've actually now just updated the application that anyone can have this dragon land in their back garden if they wish.
Seems like a fire hazard.
He's pretty good. And then if you do it in AR on location, you have these AR magic markers. So within the app, there's wayfinding, work your way between buildings, learn about the information. And then there's this lovely layer of enhancement and entertainment over the top. And for the digital visitors, they just see that all as if it was really there. But the thing that we feel magical is that enhancement to the physical locations as well should be synced and should be one-to-one. So I'll show you just a little wrap up of the entire project, and then Flora and I can jump into any questions that you may have. Feel free to throw any in the chat, and we'll go from there. But this was our 2-year project wrapped up into 2 minutes. So it was a huge team effort and a lot of fun.
Yay. I know you don't have an audience, but this, I think you'd get a better response if we were all together in person, but very exciting.
And like I said, it's on iOS and Android now. Do go and have a look around. We really think it's something special, and what the Dubai Expo has put together as a World's Fair is really cool. And the really point of it at the beginning was they realized that building a physical location means that you are instantly cutting off audiences and people from around the world who can't afford to travel to such a space. So by creating a digital variant of it, we're increasing access to the world. And that was really exciting to think about. That was where the core of the idea came from. How do you gain reach and how do you gain accessibility? And it's really cool. Thanks very much.
Yeah, we have clap emoticons come in.
I'll take a clap.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. We actually have this Q&A system, everybody. So if you click on Q&A, I think you should all be able. And Sue, please, maybe on the technical level, you can have an eye on. Here we go. They are coming in. They're coming in. Okay, so one. Thanks, all. This was a very colorful and, as expected, really, impressive and imaginative journey into sort of things that Magnopus are doing. And you basically, it's quite clear you're at the forefront of actually making these mixed reality spaces happen, not just design them, but actually making them work, and the nitty-gritty technology challenges and the scalability and all these are incredibly hard questions. I think so. Daniel Slauson, I think he's making a question that I also wanted to sort of open with. Everyone, unfortunately since Mark Zuckerberg announcement, everyone talks about the metaverse now, but there seems to still be different interpretations. And so what is your take on the metaverse? How would you best encapsulate the concept for people?
Well, we we dare not say the word metaverse for many years because it just confused people. And then Zuckerberg decided to rename his company Meta and kind of spoilt it for everybody. Like everyone's got excited. So now everyone at least knows about it, about the direction of travel, and people understand. But it's such a big term. It's such an encompassing term that it's far too big to just say off the cuff. It's literally like saying the internet. So what do you mean by the internet? Do you mean a social media platform? Do you mean the ability to have FaceTime calls? Do you mean the ability to send iMessages? Do you mean the ability to be able to have IoT devices? Like, there are so many things and types of use cases within the internet. By saying the metaverse, we're thinking too broad a term, and everyone then has to kind of define what they want within it. For me, if we're going to distill the metaverse, we're just talking about the next internet. It's the next iteration of the internet. It's Web 3.0, it's spatial computing, it's the spatial web. But really, it's the shift from the idea that we have a set of connected pages. So 2D information is held on a page that we access, or the ability to have the infrastructure behind those 2D pages, to go to 3D spaces, or 3D pages, or 3D places. And those will be powered by real-time engines. And so the web is moving from a 2D universe to a 3D universe. And once you go into 3D, everything kind of changes. Just the same as you would consider a TV to live as a flat surface within my living room that content appears on, because that's being delivered in a 2D format. What is the 3D version of television within my living room? Is there two characters sitting on the sofa opposite me having an argument? Is EastEnders in my house? Or are you sitting there? So we need to move from the idea from 2D to 3D, and that's really the underlying technologies underneath it. So spatial computing, connected spaces, Web 3.0. But I really like the idea, just trying to explain to people that I like the analogy that someone used, that we're basically 16th century surgeons trying to explain how the human body works. Like, I kind of know what an arm and a leg is, and there's some blood going, but where we are now is so far beyond that. And so we have to go through that journey all together to make lots of those mistakes. And the immersive industry, the current immersive industry, has only been kicking around for 6 or 7 years, really. So we've had dog years of development, 7 years in one. It feels like we're such a long way down the future. But for me, the metaverse is the next internet, I think, is the shortest answer.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that offers some good provocation and sort of directions. And I'll follow up with one question from the audience soon. But it strikes me that what you've presented, and I've used a lot of techniques from game design, but also the experiences themselves become more game-like. So whereas traditionally games have been one form of entertainment, then there's live sports, then there's theater, then there is, live music, right? It seems like game, even though it also has its gaming in its own right, it has its space, it seems to become more and more also a medium that's sort of infused everywhere else, right? I've recently sort of attended a Tones and I concert in Fortnite with my son. Yeah. And it's playful as much as it is a performance. So so what you brought out, that it's really interesting in terms of the workflows you apply for creating the spaces. Can you talk a little bit more about, elaborate where you feel gaming as a component is going, like, and where it sits within Magnopus and your approaches to innovation moving forward?
Absolutely. A friend of mine, Jessica Broha, who was at Google, she's now doing everything now, said on stage, and I really love it. She just said it's all game design. Everything to do with the future technologies, but also our current realities, are all game design to a lesser or greater extent. User experience design is game design. User flow, audiences going to Tesco's, is game design. It may have more like intrinsic like scores and points connected to it, but it's all to do with it. And so the idea that games design is now a place that only lives in real-time engines to do it, and games are something different. I think we need to understand that all of the skills and technologies we have in the games industry will now become will bleed into every other industry we work within. So for me, the light bulb shift for me was when I realized that a virtual reality headset was truly a new medium and not just an adaptation of 2D video or audio or text. this headset allowed me to see another universe as if I was a human within that space. And so now I needed to think differently. Although there was game tropes within it, it was more like thinking about an immersive theater experience. I needed to lead the audience and the user around the space. I needed to engage them. I needed to invite them. So the going back to the expo stuff, we realized early on that unless you really like engage with the audience, they won't do a lot of stuff. So by having these characters, these avatars around the space that approach you and invite you to go on a quest with them, to invite you to play a game with them, to invite you to see something, most of us, most people, you know, a few of us which are extroverts, will go and find something to entertain ourselves, but introverts will do nothing unless they're engaged with. So we had to layer in the experience layer, this ability to allow people to step in and be participant. Gamers often will go and find, you know, gameplay bits for themselves, but we wanted to make it so that everybody could come to this space and see it.
You touched upon a question here that Carlos put forward, which is, in your experience, what are the advantages of creating content directly in VR? And an example, he says filmmaking or sculpting. I mean, you've given us a few nuggets already, but, you know, in terms of content creation, where do you see the biggest, you know, in your own team, but also for the tools you want to create for other people to create potentially, where do you see the biggest opportunities there?
Yeah, VR is an incredible tool, but it's not the answer to everything. It's not the answer to everything because it's, you know, it costs a lot for access. It doesn't have mass adoption yet. The headsets are still slightly underpowered. But for me, it's like the highest fidelity version of an experience we can get, and the most engaging you can get, because it now makes me, you know, believe what I'm seeing is real. Even if it's high, you know, low polygons and badly lit and bright shaders, I still go, wow, that is a very brightly lit, shiny thing. I don't go, I'm looking at polygons anymore. And so VR has some really powerful tools to allow us to think about us on a humanistic scale, instead of us being, you know, passive in experience and just consuming content within a frame or through a device. We now have to reimagine ourselves, you know, on a human scale, which I think is really, really, really powerful. The big shift within, when you take it out of experience, is it has huge impacts to anything that involves, you know, the digital representation of another reality. Architects love it. The ability for me to experience a space before I have to lay any concrete or dig any holes is phenomenal. Or within the filmmaking, and it was very specific for The Lion King, it was 100% CGI movie, but they wanted to allow the current and the greatest filmmakers, cinematographers, DOPs, gaffers, sparkies, everyone that lived within the space, to not just shoot a character, like an actor in front of a green screen and have no idea and make the film in post-production. If you want to take someone who has got 40 or 50 years of experience, you need to kind of reimagine the tools for them. So we made, you know, the back end of a techno crane with all the rigs and the dollies and all the bits and pieces, hook them into some, you know, digitization, MIDI controllers, put them into Unity to drive a completely digital crane. So in lots of the shots, there's like a full techno crane out on the Serengeti next to Pride Rock. And within the cinematographer with the hat set, he's working the real handles, moving the digital crane. So we brought that physical sense of the tools that he used and put them in the digital space. It's not the answer for everything, but it is a really powerful tool for that. The bit that hadn't happened because we were too early is that construct is running in real time with 3D assets, with motion capture, with audio. Instead of delivering it as a rendered frame, we just need to deliver it as a 3D file that other people we could all go and step onto Pride Rock and see it as if we were really there. And that additional layer is where a lot of people are talking about how the metaverse will run out, which is, and a lot of people are thinking about it, is they're thinking Fortnite or Facebook Horizons or 3D places where I will go as a 3D avatar and experience another reality. More Ready Player One than anything else.
Amazing. We've got an interesting question by Jen, who was asking about sound. And, you know, when we think about AR and we look at it, you know, it's like, oh, do I really want stuff in my living room? We forget that a few hundred years ago, you know, if you wanted to listen to music, you had to go to a concert where it happened. And now music is all around us. And with Alexa and so on, augmented reality is already now in our rooms, and we can bring people in and they're through audio. Have you thought of, you know, to what extent did you consider the effect of sound designing a metaverse on public understanding of this concept of sound? You know,
A lot.
Yeah. Okay.
A
Please
lot.
shoot. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've audio is incredibly powerful. It's an incredibly powerful tool to simulate an environment, but it's an incredibly powerful storytelling tool, especially within any of the immersive technologies. We worked with binaural audio very, very early on. So spatial audio, the ability to replicate 3D placement of audio around you, not just stereo left and right. So an audio sounds like the sounds from behind you. And we did it a couple of times. We worked with Bjork on a 360 music video for her back, 2006, 7 or something like that. And so we set up the ability for her to place her instruments and her band around you within the space. So the violins were here, the drums were there, the guitar was there, keyboard was behind you, and then the ability to move them in 3D space. So what seemed like a video which was very much about her singing to you was also about the movement of those instruments around you. But the twofold, moving on to where we are now, simulating audio is exciting. The idea that when I think we've spoken before, but I knock my knuckles on this table, I could record the Foley of that, so the sound effect of that, and I could play that out every time my knuckle hits that in CG. But how hard I hit it changes the audio. The angle I hit it was how much water I've drunk changes the fleshiness of my hand, which will change the audio. So we almost need to simulate on like a physics level how audio is created to get realistic soundscapes. And realistic soundscapes are one end of the scale. The other end is simulated or directed soundscapes. And we have been brought up on a diet of TV and movies and computer games where audio is just intrinsic to the storytelling technique. We know whenever we see a car in a Hollywood movie or pretty much any movie, it makes a tire screeching noise when it drives away from us. Because that is our way of telling that a car is moving or moving at some sort of pace. Whether it did or it didn't, we needed it. If you see a phone, it rings. So we need the Foley that's layered into these virtual reality environments or these VR environments will need to come with all of the tropes that we have within cinema to be able to make it feel how we expect it to feel for us. And then if you layer in the impact of music and, whether it be intrinsically within the experience being played by a band or whether it's just there for emotional effect, even, you can lift someone's heart or you can crush them just by playing a different audioscape behind the experience itself. If you've seen any of Chris Nolan's work, he's got the shepherd tone through a lot of his movies, which once you hear it and you realize what it is just anxiety driven.
Yeah, it's mind bending as well. It's yeah. For everyone who does not know, the shepherd tone is essentially a multi-octave tone that goes down, and as soon as the lowest tone hits the band, it jumps to the top. So it creates an almost infinite impression of descent or ascent, depending on how you use it.
Yeah. And it makes you stressed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, really awful.
But used in the right way within experiences, it can drive emotional feeling and connection. So when you're, even within the, if you go and try the Expo Explorer, the application, there is incidental music throughout it. Same as if you actually go to the real Dubai Expo, they have music playing through all of the speakers hitting the foliage throughout the entire place. Same if you go to Disney theme parks, there is always music. There's a musical bed to your experience, whether it's in the real world or the virtual world. So yeah, audio is incredibly important.
Brilliant. So we've got a set of questions now that sort of, I think, probe a little bit more into problematizing the metaverse and the sort of the work, which is obviously what I know your company does, and thinking about these aspects. So the one is about sort of the cultural differences of metaverse experiences. So how would metaverse, you know, so for instance, can the Expo digital twin be experienced in different languages?
Yep.
And also, since, you know, obviously you've that was, you know, created in a very specific cultural concept. In terms of really thinking about inclusivity and, you know, really inviting people in, where do you think the sensitivities are here? What's important to consider to be really inclusive?
It's a really, really good question, and it's really hard to answer.
Yeah.
Top level answer, Expo is a multi-language. It is ethnically diverse and gender diverse. The avatars you can choose is a broad gamut. So as we go, and we're trying to make it feel as inclusive as possible, to engage as many people as possible, and to try and take away as many barriers. It's one of the reasons where we chose a mobile platform first. There's, you know, 10 million VR headsets in the world. There's probably 100 million high-end PCs, but there's 4 billion smartphones. So it's a smartphone first for reach and inclusivity, to gain access to it. What we're really talking about, though, is something more intrinsic about society and the fabric of our, fabric of our society, and how we want to live and experience the world. And the shift that's happened within the last 20 years, but really 40 at most, is globalization. We all have access to the ability to call pretty much anyone else on the planet, or text them, or go to a website, or go on a forum, or engage or see how everybody else is living around the world. And that's changed our completely how we interact with each other. I consider myself a global citizen first. I just happen to be domiciled in the UK and paying my taxes here, but the people I work with and who I want to engage with is a global workforce, a global audience, a global set of friends. And so being able to keep the content we create now, understanding that it's not about middle British white way of being and living, to being that it could be anyone. Could be Mexico, could be Japan, could be UAE, could be Australia, could be anywhere. And so we have to understand that our biases that we come from with our culture is okay, because that's been our culture to this point. We just need to understand that we need to change and adapt the content and be open to look at it through different eyes. Case in point, I've been putting together a little promotional film around what the metaverse is. And I had completely unconsciously biased put a male little CG character as the main characters through the movie. Not realizing that I had just fallen into a classic trope, a classic challenge that we all have. So it's just the ability to look at things with fresh eyes and go, no, well, we should change these things around. We can adapt them and make sure that we are open to make sure that we are inclusive as possible.
Yeah, no, I mean, and sort of, drilling a little bit deeper based on the question by John Swords. Thanks, John. About the dangers that, whatever the new internet is, or the metaverse, will just exacerbate digital divides, and how companies can address this. He also asked, is there a role for regulators?
There is a challenge between, slightly bigger subject, but there's a challenge around access to technology and access to information and access to the world's knowledge. Technologies and how they are used to augment and enhance our ability to live, play, work, how our democracies operate, how our laws operate, means that there is definitely those that have the technology and those that don't have the technology. Where it ends up is where, Elon Musk's Neuralink company is implanting digital electrodes into the human brain to allow it to interface with us at a binary root level. And those people will become a different species. They will operate and connect with technology like no one else. And so where you end up with those with the tech and those without, we already have that now. If you have a smartphone, you can access the world's knowledge. You can Google anything, you can search anything, you can find out anything, usually from a 12-year-old on YouTube teaching how to do it, but like everything is there. But if you don't have access to it, then you are blocked from any of that knowledge and any of that sharing. So we need to change it. I think there's one of the big possible positive impacts on how we are engaging with those technologies across societies is you can see how, let's say we look at India. India went from no real computer technology across its culture and its society to jumping over the personal computer, jumping over the laptop, jumping over televisions, and going straight to mobile phones and 4G connectivity. They have the highest data per person in the country, anywhere in the world, and the lowest cost for data as well, because that's how the entire country now operates, is within data. So there is an opportunity for countries to leapfrog what was a transitional sets of technologies for us into the next. And I think if you layer in where 5G technologies is enabling breadth and depth and speed, and the ability to take off some of the bigger blockers, which is the cost of silicon. So this is $1,000 device, and 90% of the time it does nothing. The rest of the time it does emails, and it has a GPU and a CPU and all kinds of other good stuff that is doing nothing. It'd be much better if this was a cloud device and this was a rendered view into it, and the box in the cloud would scale up and scale down depending on what I needed it to do. So instead of being redundant hardware, printed and delivered in my pocket, I have a $50 device which can scale up and scale down as I need it, instead of a $1,000 device where most of the time it's not being used. So I think those enabling cloud-based technologies will change access to high quality computing and high quality devices for everybody.
I think it's really fast. I don't think I'd ever considered cloud pixel streaming to devices and essentially treating devices as flat clients as a form of democratization. But in many ways it may also have tie into device reusability, longevity, recycling.
If it's just a small client, what do you need? You need a video renderer, you need an input output device. You don't need any of the other stuff in it.
Okay. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, Jen follows up on the next sort of thing that follows up from this line of thinking, which is if we have this virtual space and this virtual twin layer on top of everything that we co-inhabit and we invite people in, but obviously the digital layer may not have the same repercussion for, say, social behavior and so on, right? So to what extent are you considering the ethics and implications of this tech and how these worlds are blurred, where one is very, very impactful and full of consequences, and another is, may not have these sort of,
currently.
And people don't know what's appropriate in the metaverse, right?
Currently, it's because we've moved faster in regulation and laws, and moral standing hasn't caught up. We imagine that our digital self is a different person to who we are in the physical world. And those of us that understand where we are now are teaching our children that there's no difference. If you walk around the street swearing at people or poking them in the eye, then you're a bad human. If you do that in the virtual world, you're still a bad human. Like, that's not how I want you to operate. So when it comes down to how we figure out how we get the morality and the ethical values within that space, we just need the ability for those companies and those platform creators to put in good checks and balances. And we take a lot of the ideas of the laws that were within our countries and we move it to those platforms. But fundamentally, we educate the societies and the cultures and those users that live within those environments to not operate in that way. I think because of a lot of online communities bled from games, which were completely fantastical, and I'm wearing an avatar and I'm operating in a different way, as we move ourselves out of World of Warcraft and into an avatar within Rec Room, I might still be holding on to some of those ways of pretending to be somebody else, when actually I'm shifting gears and I'm now representing myself as me. not as a giant orc or anything else that I was playing as.
Yeah. And
so
anonymity is probably also a big contributor to the sort of,
yeah.
to many, that facilitates much of the toxic, you know, the inconsequential, no one knows who I am, and I can just literally play with personas. I guess a lot of people would sort of, and I presume you'll share this too, is that the ownership of the metaverse is being claimed already, right? And the companies that have a terrible track record in actually maintaining decency on the platform they already have, they are completely out of control. I think the pertinent question is, can we not repeat the same mistakes, and actually, you know, can this be sort of baked into the fabric of the metaverse much earlier on?
I'm an optimist. Like, I think that we can learn from the mistakes of our past within the platforms and the people creating it. But I'm also, you know, a realist. If you look about that, it's not just about the technology, it's just humankind over all history does not learn from its mistakes. Like we have been, this isn't a new thing that humans are mean to each other and want each other's things. Like, it's just the way that the world has created to get to this point. I think as we become more enlightened and we move to the next phase, that I hope that we can learn and adapt and change how we want to live within those spaces. But we've also got to really remember that not everybody is the same, and not everyone is like-minded, and not everybody wants the same way, and not everyone's a nice person, in quotes, but it really depends on your point of view. So I often talk about building a wall along your border to keep a bunch of people on the other side of it, and putting a bunch of AI-powered drones with machine guns on the top of it. For some people, it sounds pretty abhorrent. It sounds like the worst thing you could ever do. You're on the other side of the fence. It seems like the best thing we have to do. And it really depends on what side of the fence you are, but on how you look at the technology and how you are, your point of view on it. And we have to be really aware that there are always people on different sides of the fence, be it small ideas or very large ones. You just look at how galvanized the US political system has become over a set of humans that really should be able to live side by side and be able to get along. But it's been completely pushed into basically binary thought processes over huge important subjects, because people's point of view is different. And how do we get along to allow those points of view to kind of coalesce and across those different plays? And when we go into digital stuff, we will bring all of humanity with us. The metaverse is not anything that isn't as complex and as messy as the humankind. And just to finish on the metaverse thing, I am beginning to talk more about the open metaverse than the current terminology about metaverse. Facebook's is a closed platform of, you know, lots and lots of different interesting things. And the best way to think about that is that is there, you know, if I go to London and I'm going on the train, I get to London, I walk that street, one of the most electric things is that I could be walking past anybody on the planet. Almost anyone could walk past me. They could come to London, they could walk on those streets because it's a public place. And the open metaverse is the streets, it's the city, it's how it's all connected together, how my avatar and how I exist within these open spaces. But if I now go into Facebook's head office, in the reception area is a public and private space. I understand I'm entering into their building. Anyone could enter into their building, but now they're paying attention to me there. When I go through the barriers, when I check through the barriers, I'm now into their space. It's all of the rules and regulations of the place that I was, but with the layering of it's now with their, you know, their policy, their lifts, their you know, micro laws, whatever else it is, and then we'll transfer it out. And each of those different metaverses will have their own cultures, ideas, moralities, and we have to be able to step in and step out of them. Just the same as we step in and step out of buildings or go to different countries, it's going to be as complex as that.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, thanks. That went quite deep, and I think that's what we have to force. Well, we have to force ourselves to do that, and you know, it also it's super important that actors like Magnopus are active in this space, and you know, keep the the huge players on their toes, right? Because I think that's maybe one of the major opportunities is to build to enable people of all sorts of backgrounds and abilities and technical access to actually shape the metaverse, because this is inclusivity is you know, we miss out on the richness of content, and we can't just build yet another sort of internet that is biased towards one thing or another. There's lots of really nice words coming in from Jen. Thanks so much. Shannon Valler does really interesting work on human flourishing with technology. So that's maybe one thing to pick up after this. Patience, fairness, justice, wisdom, and tolerance are such virtues. Thanks for this talk. Really cool to hear. We are 3 minutes off.
We're only getting going.
Yeah, so there's maybe one more question we can squeeze in by Annie. You mentioned that VR is a lot like immersive theater. Can you see the two media interacting at all? Where does liveness, co-presence come into it? And it's actually a really interesting question, because when you are in VR, the liveness is not a given. As you say, you had to work really hard on the realism and stuff, but you know, it could be recorded, it could be replicated. You know, what makes a VR thing live, and how do you carry that liveness?
Yeah. It's so if I create a room with a table and a bunch of blocks on it, and I just go in there, I could stack the blocks up and I'd kind of be bored. If one other person is in that environment with me, we will make a game. We'll throw them to each other, we'll catch them, we'll bounce them across the table like anything else. Humanity has this ability to invent and create crazy, engaging stories just by being present with each other. So the ability to put humans together, multi-user, multi-avatar, is one of the most powerful things we can do with virtual reality. The immersive theater thing, we've done a lot of work with them, you know, Punch Drunk and a couple of other immersive companies, theater companies, of how we utilize the technology to be another place for them to tell their stories. And Felix tells a really good story about how they were trying to, so they bring a group of, an audience together of 10 people, they're taking them through this experience. Doctor Who's asking you to help rescue a bunch of people from a ship. And this was for kids, actually. And it was always like a bunch of kids that would run with it. Their imagination's rich. They'll go in, whatever else. And there will always be one kid who's just a bit scared, who's an introvert and doesn't engage, just completely leans back and basically is going to drop out of it. And all you need to do to engage an audience is basically lay the breadcrumbs or tell the story to enable them and let them engage. In this case, the main actor in there playing a part bends down and hands the kid a torch and said, could you please just look after this torch and light the way for us? And you just give the audience member or the user or the participant a mission, a guide, a thing to do. And they switch from worrying about what are they supposed to be doing in the place to, I now know that I have something to solve. And so much about it is, with, like I said, everything is gameplay, just engaging someone and giving someone an opportunity. Same as every other game you play. If you want the player to go down this street and not that one, light this street brightly, keep that one dark. They will go towards the light, literally, or play audio, or make sure this way's blocked. Like, it's all classic game design thing to guide the audience through, so a story, they can feel the same experience.
Brilliant. Now, I think, so thanks for all the fascinating responses. We've now sort of gotten to the end of our time, but I think one thing that is important to stress is that, you know, Sol, you've been a fantastic collaborator, and we've got various exciting initiatives potentially in the making going forward.
Absolutely.
So there will be opportunity beyond just this Q&A to sort of engage with Magnopus in one shape or form, and Sol's team. So I think there's been some really meaningful last minute questions coming in by Jan and Anna, which, you know, there's some really important things to address, and potentially also a really key role that university can play. I think we'll try and create sort of opportunities for exchange there. And I think, you know, if there are thoughts, I know it already continues to date. For instance, we have sort of a metaverse workshop that is organized by Jen, and thinking about the ethics and the sort of frameworks around it. I think there's super exciting opportunity, and hearing it from you, Sol, who was there as one of these very unique players within this emerging fields. I think it was a fascinating lens into the industry. I think we've had really great interaction, fascinating questions and answers, and certainly tons of food for thoughts, and hopefully also some provocation, inspiration that encouraged the people who are participating to enter the space with bring their expertise, bring their perspectives, and build something at York where we can really sort of participate in the sort of making of this new space. So Sol, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure, and a real honor to be here and talk about some of the more interesting and difficult, thorny subjects. I do feel quite honored that we do work at the forefront of this tech, and we're trusted by some of the biggest technology and IP owners in the world to kind of push the boundaries of where it lives. But we also are, very cognizant of what we are creating lays the foundation for many other people to follow. So we're trying to get that right. Yeah. I'd be more than happy to be involved with any ongoing symposiums, workshops, Q&A, Jen, etc. If you wanted to pick up an email and carry on something, if you have a subject you want to discuss in more detail, I'm more than happy to it. I really enjoy the edges of where our technology can be used just as much as kind of the middle where we work at the moment. So thanks so much.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, thanks everybody for attending and for a fantastic seminar, which Sue will now wrap up. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Great wrap up, Sue. Appreciate it. Thanks. We'll see you all later.
See you all. Bye-bye.